RevExpo Studio. Hello everyone and welcome to RevExpo Studio. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Cathy Hackl. Cathy is a leading tech futurist and globally recognized business leader specializing in augmented reality, virtual reality, and spatial computing. She is one of the LinkedIn top technology voices, the highest honor on the platform, and a champion for diversity. Ms. Hackl has worked with some of the biggest names in the tech, including Amazon Web Services, Magic Leap, just to name a few. She leads the Future Intelligence Group, a futures research and consulting firm that works with clients in tech, fashion, media, government, and defense, implementing innovation strategies, strategic foresight, and emerging technologies. Cathy Hackl, welcome to RevExpo Studios from the Metaverse.
Thank you again, Cathy. First question for you today. What led you to become an expert in the Metaverse?
So I think all of us that are working in some ways, in faces of the Metaverse, we're all learning as we go. It's hard to be, to say I'm an expert per se, because this is so new. What I would say is that I've spent my career in media, in the storytelling, the last 6 years, very heavily in technology, specifically in augmented reality and virtual reality, with companies like HTC Vive, which makes a virtual reality device. Then also went to Magic Leap as well, which, as you probably know, they have their own vision of the Metaverse called the Magicverse. And when I was there, very lucky to have been there when Neil Stephenson, the sci-fi writer, he happened to be Magic Leap's chief futurist, right? He's considered one of the people to coin the term or to first mention the term metaverse, right? So very lucky to have gone through there, and be in a company that had that vision of the metaverse. A lot of companies weren't, this company was born from that type of vision. So then went to AWS to work in cloud. So definitely understood some more things related to the infrastructure. I've worked with all sorts of brands deploying, augmented reality, virtual reality solutions. I would say the last 6 months have been mostly, straddling my AR VR world, but also working with a lot of my more that metaverse clients. So, Web3, NFT, metaverse, digital goods, virtual fashion, kind of work that I've been doing. And, I have clients in many different industries. I would say some of my biggest clients are in luxury, high-end fashion, that are interested in the metaverse. And, I was recently featured in 60 Minutes Plus. So, as not an expert, but, as a source of information for the metaverse. So it's been, it's just been really exciting, to be honest. So I think we're all working together towards what is the metaverse. I'm flattered that you call me an expert. I think we're all working together on this.
You've been mentioning a few of the domains from all these digital transformation, and more specific, you mentioned the augmented reality and the virtual reality, perhaps as the main components to what the metaverse is going to become. So what are some of the latest trends, in your professional opinion, with the metaverse in the space?
Well, I would say, obviously, unless you've been under a rock, you've noticed, that non-fungible tokens have become something, something that used to be a little bit of obscure before. A lot of people were like, what is this? What, a crypto kitty? What? To nowadays, NFTs. CNN is starting to mint historical moments. Fox Entertainment is launching their own creative labs. You've got Burberry and Givenchy, getting into Givenchy, let me pronounce it correctly, getting into NFTs. It seems to be, just something obviously more than a trend. A lot of people say, is it a bubble? Possibly. I mean, I think that, non-fungible tokens, start off in some ways as art, right? But then the true use is utility. Right now it's collectibles and those sorts of things, but eventually it's about proven authenticity and about provenance and, and access as well. So I really like what Gary Vaynerchuk did with his VFriends, which was his NFT launch. So part of the VFriends, launch was he launched a certain amount of VFriends, and a certain number of them gave you access to his conference, to VCon, for I think it's 3 years. So using it for those sorts of things. There were other different VFriends that would give you access to him. So yeah, I think his use was quite interesting. I would say another trend obviously is virtual fashion and digital goods and everything that's happening there, kind of in the gaming world. I think it's interesting to think about. I hate seeing news that say fake dress sold for $800, right? Just because it exists in the virtual world doesn't make it fake. It's real. It just happens to exist in a virtual form, right? And I always explain this to people. I said, during the pandemic, you probably had to have Zoom calls during Christmas or during special occasions. And just because they were on Zoom, it didn't make it less real. You were still talking to your friends, right? You would rather be with your friends and family, right, up close. But just because you had a Christmas call during Christmas Day, or wish someone Happy New Year on Zoom because you couldn't be with them, didn't make it less real. Same thing with my son. Like, my first concert was, at a stadium. His first concert was Little Nas X on Roblox. He lived that experience. It was real to him. So I think it's changing the narrative and understanding that just because it exists in a virtual form doesn't make it less real. It's real. It just happens to exist in a virtual form.
In terms of the challenges that you see for the metaverse, sure, we can mention some of them being for our culture, but what about organizations?
Yeah, I think organizations are wrapping their heads around the metaverse. What does it mean to lead in the metaverse, right? What does it mean if you eventually need to manage people that work in the metaverse? So this is an interesting question, because I talk to a lot of brands, right? And it's like virtual worlds. A friend of mine, I wrote this on LinkedIn, but a friend of mine said everyone wants virtual worlds. Like, it's this rush right now for that. And when I talked to some of the brands that are exploring those virtual worlds, I said, look, if it's a one-off marketing activation, okay, do it, because that's what you want to do. But if this is really a long-term metaverse play where you really want to, explore those virtual worlds, you need to think through a lot of different things. How do you keep that virtual world relevant and fresh? Right? How do you keep people coming back? Because what you don't want is, one of your consumers or your clients to come back and just not see anything new, right? Not make it exciting. You don't want them to come back to an empty world. So how do you keep people coming back, right? How do you staff that world, right? How do you staff that world? So same thing. How do you eventually manage the people that work in the metaverse? Because, metaverse is a very, even though it's a sci-fi concept, that first came to be about 30 years ago, it's like a new business term in some ways nowadays, where people are still like, what does that even mean? So, whether it is people in accounting, whether it's people in legal, whether it's people, in all sorts of parts of the org, they probably have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, right? So I think there's a lot of things. There's challenges. I mean, I think, if you're in a brand and you're an innovator and you're part of the innovation team, or you're part of some teams, you are all in on the metaverse, you're super excited, you're testing things. That doesn't mean that everyone else in your organization is in on it or understands it. So I think there's a lot of evangelizing that needs to happen in education, that needs to happen within the organizations, and a lot of questions that need to be asked, right? Obviously, legal teams are going to ask lots of questions. What happened? And I spoke to Vogue Business about this. I said it's a bit of a minefield, because when you talk about IP for a lot of these brands, there might be young creators that are starting to create, or saying, hey, I want to grab this part of this brand or this part of this other brand and make a hybrid brand or hybrid something, right? And they're trying to express themselves, but they might not understand that it's someone else's IP. So it's a bit of a wild west in some ways, but there are a lot of opportunities. There are challenges, like educating, understanding, trying to figure out, what does this mean for my company? What does this mean for my role? I was actually, I was reading a book by Tracy Follows that she sent me a copy of, a great book, The Future of You, I think it's called, in 21st Century. And in one of the recent interviews she did, she talked about how corporate brands are going to be affected by personal brands, right? Personal brands, at the end of the day, brands should be personal, right? And the people that have invested in creating those personal brands, whether it's a YouTuber or where it's someone like me, I mean, people will come to me because they want to work with me, right? Not because of something else. They want to work with me, or they want me to write about them. So I think it's really interesting, and with that, I don't want to get into it, but I think corporate America has no idea what to do with personal brands when personal brands come and work for them. Like, it's a really interesting thing that maybe we should explore it at a different time, but there's different challenges. There's lots of opportunities, of course.
You mentioned about opportunities. Do you see any of them scaling up in the metaverse for new markets, even markets that are non-existent nowadays?
Yeah. I mean, who would have thought, if I would have told my parents a year ago that I'm helping a company that sells virtual properties with growth strategies, they're like, excuse me, virtual real estate, right? So, for example, Upland, which is a company that I'm helping with metaverse growth strategies, they've minted 1 million NFT properties in 18 months. I mean, so 18 months ago, they weren't doing this. So yeah, there's huge opportunities for growth. And I think the big mindset shift here is the concept and idea. The physical world is finite. I said this in 60 minutes. It's the physical world is finite. There's only so much you can build. It's pretty big. I'm not going to say it's not, but there's pretty big, but there's a limit as to what you can do or what you can extract. But in the virtual world, it's almost limitless, right? What you can build, what you can create, the revenues that you might get from things you do in these virtual spaces. And I think that that's where brands need to start thinking through is, is this a revenue generator for me? Is this another revenue stream for my brand and for my goods? If I'm selling a service or I'm selling goods, how do I sell them virtually, in this virtual world? So yeah, I think lots of opportunities. I think it's Cathy Wood's ARK Invest that had a statistic that by 2025, the digital goods economy is going to be worth close to 400 billion. And digital goods could be anything from a sword in Minecraft to a digital Burberry skin in League of Legends or something. So it's a really broad term, right? And could be NFTs. So yeah, it is an interesting, there's interesting opportunities. But at the beginning, we're also all pioneering, right? So we're all literally pioneering what's coming.
We are arriving to the very end of this wonderful interview, Cathy, and thank you so much again. For this last question, would you share with us a current project that you are working on?
Well, I already shared Upland, which is very exciting. I am working on bringing to life a really exciting podcast on the metaverse. With some big brands and some big players. So very excited about that. More to come soon. And yeah, I see myself, I wear several hats. One of the things I try to do is be out there speaking about the metaverse and trying to explain it. It was funny because with my 60 minutes interview, the interview actually lasted 2 hours. We sat down, we got deep into a lot of different parts, right? But because it is 60 minutes, they use some of the parts that were easier to understand for a broader audience. So I thought it was interesting that, some people really, overwhelmingly congratulated me. And there are certain people in the industry that push back and said, that's too simple. And I literally said, look, it's about trying to reach more people. You need to make it as simple as possible, not using tech jargon, because they're going to check out. And 60 minutes, when I was doing the interview, they would be like, how can you explain this in the easiest term possible? Right. So I think it's interesting. I think one big thing that I feel very strongly about is that not one person, so it shouldn't be me and it shouldn't just be you and it shouldn't just be, a person at X company, an advisor at X company. I think that, we should all be working together to define the metaverse. We are all working together to create it and to move it forward. Not one single company should be defining it either. So, we don't want the corporation to be the one to run, the Oasis, like in Ready Player One. You want, many different players, many different startups having a chance at exponential growth and everything that's coming with Web3.
Cathy, thank you very much for being with us today at RevExpo Studio. And thank you to our audience. I think we all excited about the metaverse and the greatest news in the near and long-term future. Thank you so much.
I'll see you in the metaverse.
RevExpo Studio.